Good morning, class. At least it's morning for me. Today I am going to do the video for reading. And what I need you to do, please, is be sure that you have note pages in front of you so that you can, hang on, I can't talk and do this at the same time. I need to get this started from the beginning. Okay, so that you can take notes during this lecture. And we're going to turn those in at the end, and I have a Dropbox set up for you to be able to do that. So we're going to talk about reading for college success and how that's a little bit different. But one of the first things to think about, because not everybody loves reading, though some of you do, reading grows your vocabulary, helps you encounter new ideas, uncover new theories, discover how things work. You can see the different things there. It can be very fun. But what we're really going to talk about today is active reading and how important that is for your college success. If you don't engage with the material before, during, and after reading, you are far less likely to retain what you learn. So there's some pretty simple steps for active reading. There are 3 steps for active reading. This is what your paper is going to be about. You want to prepare to read with focus, and review what you've read. And these are the things that research has actually shown help your brain process the information and retain it. So embrace reading. And this is all getting prepared to read. Reading is a central life skill and a study skill. Many of the strategies that help you read successfully also help with note-taking, studying, and writing, and all of those things are topics that we're going to be moving into over the next couple of weeks. So your inputs typically are reading, going to class, and an online class. It's actually looking up the materials, seeing what's been posted, reading the announcements, that type of thing. The effort is taking notes, studying. For some of you, reading is actually the effort, but being able to begin processing that information. And then your outputs are going to be taking the test, writing your papers, giving presentations, things like that. These are also applicable in work, although you don't necessarily always take tests in work. We are now, as state employees, having to take tests on everything from safe driving to ethics in the workplace. So it does happen. It will stay with you even after you're done with your educational goals. So part of getting prepared to read is making sure you actually are ready to kind of think about how much reading you have to do. Some people are just absolutely avoid looking at the last page of the book. You don't want to know how it ends if you're reading for pleasure. But in a textbook, when you're reading a chapter, it's good to see where the chapter ends. How many pages do you have? Over time, as you do this, you'll begin to get an idea of how long it takes you to read 30 pages in a particular book. It will take you far less time to read 30 pages in a book like our college success book than it will take most people to read 30 pages in a math textbook. Because the material is very different. It processes differently. Some may read the math book faster. You may have to read reading material more than once to be able to learn it, but these steps will actually help you do that. So read the preface and introduction in any chapter. Our book always has the preface is usually on this. For this chapter, it's on this sort of beige page, and they usually have some sort of little story or tell you why it's important. If the chapter has a table of contents, read it. If it doesn't, look at the book's table of contents. Usually it'll tell you under that chapter some of the topics. Read the chapter summary. Our book has a chapter summary. It's very short, but it helps you begin to understand what we're reading about and why. Look at the headings and the key terms throughout. And what you're doing, the example I gave my daughter, your brain is like this giant filing cabinet. Right? And so anytime you hear a brand new word or a new concept, your brain is going, okay, what is that? Where do I put it? How do I store it? How am I going to get it back? If you've never heard that term before and you read it the first time, all that activity is going on in your brain as you're scanning across the words that actually describe it. That particularly happens if you're in a lecture class or listening to a lecture, and it's concepts that are totally new to you. If you have read ahead of time, if you have previewed the information ahead of time, your brain already knows where to store that, and it can focus on storing details instead of just trying to figure out where in the heck to put it so that you can actually get it back. So it's always good to do this. You want to develop purposeful reading questions. So as you're scanning and looking, you're trying to figure out, why is this important to me? Some of you have said in your discussions that you don't like theory stuff, that's harder for you than actually applicable things that you can use immediately in your life. So when you're getting ready to read, figure out or think about, why is this important? When am I ever going to use this again? It'll help you focus on what's most important. It may be that the answer is because I want to graduate from college and this is required, because you may not understand right away why that particular math class is required. For me, that was my biggest challenge. But I use algebra every day in my work because I am always having to figure out the X. I'm always having to figure out I have this much budget available. I have this many things I have to get. How much can I spend on each item? That's really basic algebra. It's also basic multiplication, but you can begin to see how that begins to apply. Look for strategies for identifying or creating. You want to look at the beginning or end of the chapter questions. In our book, the discussion questions, there are recommended discussion questions in the margin. Some of those you'll recognize as I've picked out and used some of those for some of our content questions for our chapters. Some of them, it's just a good trigger for you to think about. You can create your own questions by looking at the headings and key terms. And you're using critical thinking skills here to try to determine what it is. I loved Christine's comment when when we did the personality thing, and she said she shares a personality type with Thomas, one of Jesus's disciples, and George Washington, but she kind of doesn't know how they got that, since those people weren't even alive when the person that developed the test was alive. And that's a very good point. That's critically thinking. That's analyzing what you're learning. And it's perfectly fine to use some skepticism when you're looking at some of this stuff to figure out. They do look at behaviors to do that, and those are possible similar personality types, but obviously it's not an empirical study that gives you an absolute flat, this is what you are. I've taken those personality tests multiple times over the years, and though my letter types don't change dramatically, the two middle ones have flopped because I'm pretty even on some of those. So just take in the information, use what helps you, and understand that not all of it is going to apply to every part of your life. It's okay to be skeptical. You want to use similar strategies with all of your college reading material. So again, estimate how much time you need to read. Skim the first few paragraphs. Scan the headings. Make your questions. It's okay to mark up your book. If you don't want to write in your book because of that, but get you some sticky notes and put sticky notes, write on your sticky notes and stick them in the chapters where it is appropriate. Make notes on your own paper, draw symbols, write quick summaries in your own words. Highlight. I love highlighting. I actually have different colors of highlighters, and I usually highlight in blue if it's a definition, and I highlight in yellow if it's just an important concept. And that may work for you. Whatever works for you is what you should do. Take notes. Take really thorough notes if you're only going to have time to read it once. You can take broader notes if you plan to reread the material, but you need to make sure you schedule time to do that. Evaluate the quality and usefulness of what you've read. I was talking about that a minute ago. Form your own conclusions. Being a college student and becoming an educated person is about fostering that and developing that ability to think critically, to question, to not just accept everything that you're told as fact, particularly in today's society when anybody sitting in their living room can post a very professional looking website. You need to be able to discern whether what they're telling you matches up with what you have actually known to be fact throughout your life. And sometimes being a college student means reconsidering some of the things that you accepted as facts that may not have the level of factual backup that you had been led to believe. That doesn't mean you have to change your faith or your value system, but it does help you begin to understand other cultures and other situations that may not be the way that they first appear because you're coming at it with your own bias, your own experiences. So think about what you're reading and how it applies to your life or your everyday situation. You do want to reread if you have time. You want to invest the time to expand your vocabulary. It does no good, as I was mentioning earlier, if you come across a word you don't know. In college reading, it's not okay to just skip it and see if you can come back to it later. You need to have your computer handy if you're reading online, and go to Webster.com and look up the definition. Some of our textbooks, some of the online e-text you'll have, you can click on the word and it'll pull the definition up right there in your tablet or phone or browser or whatever you're using to use it. Continue reading if you see something. Continue reading to see if something you read later might clarify things. So sometimes you are confused as you're going through it, and you just need to kind of gut through it. Don't stop if you get confused, but do what you can to try to clarify it as you go. Ask a classmate or an eligible friend to help you understanding it. The act of discussing these topics with people actually does help you learn it and remember it better. And the absolute best way to learn material that I've found is to try to teach somebody else. Try to explain to somebody in your family what you've read about or what you're learning and why it's important. Some of you have talked about your kids, and talking to your children about this reading process and the difference between reading for fun and reading for schoolwork could be very helpful to you and to them. Find help online. If you are not familiar with the Khan Academy, it's khanacademy.org, KAHN academy.org, or you can Google it. I'm not positive that's the right website. He has hundreds of very short video clips on very specific topics that are really well done and can help, because he explains it in a different way, maybe what triggers and helps say, oh, now I get how to solve that math problem or how to do that particular thing. You always need to be comfortable asking your instructor. That's what they're there for. And if you are all online students, and if you run into situations where you're not getting answers at all or responses, I really need to know that, because we are trying to make sure that they have adequate help to be able to do that. And while I'm on it, Tamika, I'm going to be sending you an email about your business class, because we're trying to fix that situation. That is not what we want our online classes to be like. Read with focus, boost your reading efficiency. So set brief reading goals. If reading is hard for you, or if a particular topic or textbook is hard, set a brief time. Say, I'm going to read for 20 minutes. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get up and I'm going to move around. I'm going to make sure I don't have distractions in my reading place. I'm just going to read in chunks. So try to just look at a particular section, and you can begin to increase your efficiency and your retention by stopping after that section and kind of reviewing what it is, thinking about what it is that you're reading. Skimming. One of the best classes I took in college was a speed reading class. Sometimes it's good to just speed read through it, just where you just are looking, you're literally just letting your eyes flow across the text, not trying to retain a lot of it, but just letting it flow. And again, it's your brain beginning to process those words, but you only do that if you can also go back and reread it thoroughly, because it's not going to help you retain it, it's going to help you process it a little better. Reviewing is the third step in active reviewing and active reading. So the active reading steps, just as a refresher, we prepare to read, we read with focus, and then we review what we've read. So state out loud information you've learned. State it in your head if you're in the library. I think that's funny. Reciting out loud helps you remember the information you've learned, particularly if you're an auditory reader. An auditory learner. Some of our ebooks, and I think it was Tamika, one of you indicated that you're using the e-reader because some of our textbooks have, and I think this one does, it'll actually read the text to you. And so if that helps you remember it, take advantage of that. You always want to try to summarize what you've done. Write down central ideas from a reading in your own words. You can either use short paragraphs or bulleted lists. And this is not copying everything down word for word, but trying to pick out the most important points. And that is a struggle. I recognize several of you mentioned in your paper, your first paper, that's one of the challenges, is trying to figure out what's the most important. And you're not alone. That is a challenge, but the more you do it, the better you will get at sort of picking out those things, and you'll learn. Just want to think carefully about what you've read. In reviewing, always look over your notes between classes, and online, that's, multiple times during the week. Study your summaries, discuss the main ideas of a chapter with a study partner. You've now all been introduced to Zoom, and you are able to use that anytime, and it would be great to develop study partners in your classes and say, hey, do you have time? Can we either talk on the phone or get on Zoom and look at some of this stuff before the test? Recall the answers to your purposeful reading questions and think about the things that you had written down. Make up your own test items. This is a really good way to see if you're actually retaining the information. It will also help you kind of identify, what do you think the teacher's going to ask you about? What do you think is the most important part of this chapter? And if you do have study groups and y'all share that stuff, you'll be very well prepared for your test in most cases. Share your reading notes with a friend and get help from them filling in any missing information. See how closely your things match if you're both doing these kinds of strategies. So, spotlight on research. Reading for fun is really good for you. Research suggests reading for pleasure actually helps any reading skills. So most of you have said that you do like to read. If you don't feel bad, but try to make yourself read some every week, whether it's the newspaper, journals, magazines, and certainly your textbooks. Reading for math and science classes it takes a different part of your brain to read those books, so you do want to budget your time wisely. Make sure you're keeping up and not falling behind. In math in particular, you want to follow the rules and things as simple as the order of operations. So you do multiplication first, then division, then addition, then subtraction. So you have to do those, and you have to do the parentheses. You do exponents first, parentheses second. I don't remember, but there's an acronym for that I'm not remembering. But you have to follow those rules in the right order, or you won't get the right answer. If you don't understand symbols and formulas, you're going to struggle. So you need to make sure you're looking up or identifying what do those mean. Study the diagrams and models in the book. That's one of the things I do when I'm pre-reading, is I go through and look at all the pictures and the diagrams first, things that are in the boxes. And one of the things that I noticed on page 130 in our text this week, there's a green box at the bottom of that page that says chapter outcomes. And when I first saw that, I was like, oh, cool, it's right here for the chapter outcomes. That's an example because it's in a box. So that's an example of a different class. That's not the chapter outcomes for our reading text for the success class. This is an example because it's in a box, it's an image, and it's got a figure number, figure 6.3, that describes what it's for. But if you look at those beforehand, you'll be more familiar with what's going on. Math and science, the real rule is practice, practice, practice. You cannot solve problem sets once and do well on your homework and expect to do well on the test unless math is naturally your gift. You have to practice. It's like skateboarding or riding a bike or cooking or doing anything else. The more you do it, the more natural it will become, and you do have to do it. And some of you have mentioned that you use flashcards. That is an excellent way to memorize terms. It's also good modeling for your children. So do that. Journal articles. Journals are scholarly magazines that publish academic and scientific papers. I find them difficult to read if I don't use these reading strategies. The authors are typically professors or researchers, and they're describing research they're conducting, sharing ideas or theories, summarizing the research. Sometimes it's original work such as poetry or short stories, but you'll hear on the radio or news a lot about research shows that bacon is bad for you. And then you get to see it, and they did a study of 50 people, and I just happen to like bacon, but they did a study of 50 people. Well, just logically thinking, is 50 people a sample size that could be extracted to the entire population of the United States or of the world? So being able to read these journal articles begins to be really important. These are some of the sections of a journal article. So there will always be an abstract that summarizes it. That's at the top. There will always be an introduction. That's the review of supporting research, a description of the research questions, kind of what hypothesis they may have had. I think bacon causes clogged arteries or whatever the thing may have been. The methods is a key part of a journal article. So what did they study? How did they get their sample size? How did they determine how big to make it? Were they all people that lived in a certain region? Were they all people with common things and problems? It's a different outcome if you study the effects of bacon on people that have already had heart attacks or heart issues than if you study healthy 20-year-olds. So you kind of have to figure out what they're doing and why. The results is the description of the statistical analysis. So that's where you'll see the percent of outcome, and they'll have what they call T-scores. You'll get all this in your statistics classes, but they'll be explaining, and it's the numerical explanation of what they found and was it significant or not. Was it significance usually means, did this particular thing they were studying, to what extent is that the cause of whatever they're studying? Because so many aspects, particularly in studying humans, there's so many variables and different factors that you can't control for. So you have to be careful about that. And then the discussion is usually the written summary of the findings or the answers to the research questions. So again, these are just the definitions, the abstract. Well, it's actually suggesting what you do. Read the abstract and state the article's main idea. That's what the abstract does, but try to get it down to a couple of sentences. Read the introduction and focus on the hypothesis. Read the description of the discussion, because the authors are going to state their answers, especially in the first few paragraphs. Once you understand the results, you want to read the methods and results sections to understand how they came to their conclusions, and think, do you agree? Did they do this in a way that was consistent with what you think was appropriate? And if not, why not? And that will kind of help you figure out what's important. Journal articles are primarily written for college professors, researchers, and experts in the field. When you're reading for online course materials in your online courses, you're going to do more reading online because you don't have that benefit of the in-class discussion. So again, we talked about last week with time management. Make sure you create a schedule. Make sure you have early access to the online materials. Our classes are set up in 7 weeks with 1 week in between. Certainly by finals week, but probably a little before that, you should be being prepared to purchase or secure your books for the next term. That 1 week in between may or may not be enough time for wherever you get your books to ship them to you. So you want to be doing that in advance so that you know that you will have your materials by the first day of class or before, so that you can actually use them. Learn how to mark up text online. Different books, different publishers have different ways to do this. Some of them are very easy. Some of them are not so easy, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. Consider printing them out. If you can't mark them up in your e-reader or on your computer, consider printing them out. Or if it does allow you to do that on the computer, you can print to file and print it to a PDF file, and Adobe Acrobat, the PDF reader, will allow you to do some markup. Read and respond to online posts is always critical. And then how does this apply to work? How is this going to affect you at work? I am always asked to go read and find out. Anytime we want a new policy or a new proposal for programs, the very first question I'm always asked is, what are other schools doing? How do they do it? Can we mimic what they do? We don't have to recreate the wheel every time we're trying to put in a new process. So reading relevant information is a crucial part of performing any job duty effectively. Sometimes it's just being able to read shipping reports. Some of you have talked about reading, drafting, doing the drafting and being able to read those incredibly detailed electrical drawings and mechanical drawings. I've had to look through those as we've been building new buildings to put in technology. I'm amazed at the people that can do that because it's so detailed and so specific. You're going to want to stay current in your field, so you're going to want to identify the best sources of current information. Very often there's a professional organization with newsletters you can subscribe to. Very often there are things called listservs. This is a little bit older technology as it uses email, but there are thousands and thousands of listservs out there on all kinds of topics. And when you subscribe to that listserv, you get an email, and you can set your settings up. Either once a day you get a digest, or once a week you get a list, or you can get them as people post about your specific things. I'm actually still on a listserv group of registrars at small schools that use the same student information system that we do. But I would never have met those 45 or 50 people if I hadn't subscribed to that listserv, and many of them have the same exact challenges that we have, and they've figured out workarounds for some things, and we've solved others, so together we're getting that information. You want to also use reliable and reputable websites, blogs, and social media to stay up to date. I'll put in a plug, be really careful with social media. It never goes away, even if you delete it. You never know what's been copied and forwarded and put out there. So if you've never Googled yourself, you might want to do that just to see what is out there. And I have not done that for any of you, but I will do it for me. I do it for me pretty once a year or so just to see what's out there. There's a lot of people with my name, but nothing that's attributed to me that I don't want out there that I've found so far. But just be careful and make sure your kids know to be careful what they put online. Another, just continuing with reading at work, and this is the end, you're always going to want to expand your skill set. So again, looking at relevant websites, picking up a book or a journal article on a topic that's related to your job or what you do is always going to help you move forward. And there are tons of these types of things for every major and every career field out there. So once you're done, take your minutes, upload them to the Dropbox. You can take a picture of them because I know you've handwritten them. That's what we wanted you to do. Take a picture of them and upload the picture to the Dropbox, and I'll have instructions on how to do that in the Dropbox. So thanks very much. Hope you have a great day. And I have to figure out how to stop sharing. What happened? Don't tell me did I just do all that? Are you kidding?